Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something, truly chilling black-eyed children.
Ooh, yeah.
You know those stories you see online about those kids with completely black eyes showing up and wanting to be let in?
It's one of those modern urban legends that really gets under your skin.
Yeah.
It really plays on like a lot of our primal fears, the darkness, the unknown, and just something sinister behind his seemingly innocent face.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so where did this whole black-eyed children thing come from?
Well, the origin story is pretty fascinating. It goes
Hmm,
back to 1996 and this Texas reporter named Brian Bethel.
okay.
And he shared two different encounters he had with these eerie kids in Abilene, Texas.
So it all started with one guy's experience.
Exactly. And the way he shared it is really what fueled the whole thing. I mean, think about it. This was the early days of the internet, and he posted his story on a ghost-related mailing list.
Right.
And it basically went viral from there.
Yeah, so it's like those, you know, friend of a friend ghost stories we all used to tell, except this one was digital. Did his account actually say what happened in these encounters?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of his stories takes place in a parking lot at night. And he's sitting in his car when these two boys approach him and ask for a ride home. Pretty normal, right?
Right.
Except
Except they had the black eyes.
precisely. And Bethel described feeling this overwhelming sense of dread, like something just wasn't right. He said their skin was unusually pale, and they kept insisting on being let into his car, which just added to the whole uneasiness.
Yeah, that's so creepy. I feel like a lot of people would have just, slammed the door and sped off.
Oh, for sure. It's like a classic horror movie setup, right?
Yeah.
But what's even more interesting is how this one story became this whole foundation for an online phenomenon.
You mean like creepy pasta?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard of that, those scary stories that spread online.
Exactly. Bethel's account was so vivid and so unsettling that it basically became a blueprint for tons of other black-eyed children's stories.
Right.
People started sharing their own encounters and adding their own details and their own twists, and the legend just grew from there.
Oh, wow. So it's like that game of telephone where the story gets a little more distorted with each retelling.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just limited to the internet, is it? Didn't hear about a black-eyed children movie?
You're right. There was a horror film released in 2012 called Black-Eyed Kids that was actually funded through Kickstarter.
Wow.
It goes to show you how much this legend has captured the public's imagination.
Yeah, and it didn't stop there, did it? Weren't there some tabloid stories about these kids too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Huh.
In 2013, MSN ran an episode of their Weekly Strange series that featured reports of these black-eyed children. And then in 2014, the Daily Star, a British tabloid, even like splashed these stories across their front page. It
Wow.
was all this media attention just adding fuel to the fire.
It's amazing how one guy's story in a parking lot could spawn like a whole urban legend.
It really speaks to the power of storytelling, especially when a story taps into something that resonates with our fears.
Yeah. And it's interesting that everyone has a different theory about what these kids might be. Aliens, vampires, ghosts. It's like a
Yeah.
paranormal buffet.
Yeah, we'll dive into those theories in more detail later, but what stands out to you so far? What's catching your attention about this whole black-eyed children phenomenon?
It's got to be the eyes for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those kids, there's those who represent innocence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with those completely black eyes, it's just unsettling.
Yeah, it's like that uncanny valley effect
Yeah,
where something looks almost human, but just off enough that it's really disturbing.
totally.
Yeah.
So you mentioned all these different theories about what these kids could be, aliens, vampires, ghosts. Where do those interpretations even come from?
Well, each one reflects like anxieties or beliefs we already have. So for aliens, we're
Yeah.
fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial life, right? But we're also a little bit wary of their intentions. So the thought of them disguising themselves as children trying to get into our homes really plays into that fear of the unknown.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. What about vampires? So that seems like a bit of a stretch to me.
It's not as far-fetched as you might think. Remember Bethel's story? He mentioned how those kids really wanted to be invited into his car,
Oh, right.
which kind of echoes that classic vampire myth. They can't enter your home unless they're invited in. And then there's the whole pale skin thing.
Okay, yeah, I see the connection now. And what about ghosts? Why would people think of black-eyed children as spirits?
Well, there's this long history of ghost stories that involve children, especially ones who died tragically.
Right.
So it makes sense that people would see black-eyed children through that lens.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of sadness and mystery to the legend.
It's like we're trying to make sense of something scary by connecting it to something we already know, even if that something is just as spooky.
That's a great point. And it's so interesting how these stories can be interpreted in so many ways. It's like a Rorschach test, you know? It kind of reveals our fears and our fascinations. What's interesting, too, is that a lot of ghost hunters take these stories pretty seriously.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they see them as evidence of the supernatural, which adds another layer of mystery and fear to it all.
But not everyone buys into these supernatural stuff, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
got to be some skeptics out there.
Oh, of course. Skeptics are quick to point out that there's no hard evidence. No photographs, no videos, no police reports.
Right.
It's all based on personal testimony, which we know can be unreliable.
Yeah, memories can be tricky,
Uh-huh.
especially when fear is involved. It's easy for stories to get exaggerated.
Exactly. And skeptics also often compare these stories to other folklore tales that have been around for centuries.
Like what?
You know, like phantom hitchhikers, the hook man in the back seat.
Yeah.
It's all the same basic formula. A mysterious figure, a sense of dread, and that warning to just stay away.
It makes you wonder if we're just naturally drawn to these kinds of stories. True or not?
I think you're right. Even Snopes, the website that debunks urban legends, you know,
Yeah.
they've weighed in on the black-eyed children. They categorize it as a legend, kind of like Bigfoot. You know, they acknowledge that a lot of people believe it, but there's no real proof. And then Sharon Hill, she's a science writer who's researched a lot of paranormal claims,
Right.
and she couldn't find any solid evidence either.
So if there's no evidence, how does this legend keep going? Why do we keep telling these stories?
Well, Al Hill thinks it's mainly because of that friend of a friend type of storytelling. You know, someone hears a creepy story, they share it with someone else, and it just takes on a life of its own.
Right.
It spreads through social media and online forums. It becomes like this viral chain letter of fear.
Yeah, I get it.
And that lack of tangible evidence actually makes it even more appealing. It lets our imaginations run wild, and that makes the stories even more personal and unsettling.
Yeah, it's like we're drawn to the mystery,
Mm-hmm.
even when it freaks us out a little.
Mm.
We started with one guy's encounter in a parking lot, and now it's a whole online thing, a horror movie, even the tabloids. It's pretty wild.
It shows how a story can grab our imagination, especially when it plays on our fears, you know, like the darkness, the unknown, the thought of something creepy getting into our homes. It's unsettling.
And the fact that it's kids makes it even creepier.
Mm.
You know, it really messes with the idea of kids being innocent. It's disturbing.
For sure. It goes against what we expect, and that makes it work. But even if there's no proof that these black-eyed children exist, the stories still spread. So what does that tell us? Why are we fascinated by these legends even if we think they might not be true?
I don't know. Is it because we want to believe in something more than the ordinary? Or is there something deeper?
It could be a few things. We like to be curious about things we can't explain. We want stories that challenge how we see the world, even if they're more like folklore than facts.
It's like that saying, we want to believe. Maybe we need these stories to understand things that are confusing, to make our fears feel real.
Or maybe it's a way to face those fears safely. Like when we watch a scary movie, we get a thrill from being scared, but we know it's not real.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
But even if the black-eyed children are just in our heads, they still tell us something about ourselves, right?
Definitely. They show that we're interested in the unknown, that we want to figure out the things that go bump in the night. It's a reminder that stories have power, the power to spread and change and connect to something deep inside all of us.
So next time you hear a knock at the door on a dark night,
Mm-hmm.
and you see those black eyes looking at you,
Maybe don't answer it. You never know what's waiting out there.
what do you think, though? Could the black-eyed children stories be real? Or are they just another scary story we tell ourselves?
That's something we all have to decide on our own. One thing's for sure, though. The legend of the black-eyed children will stick with us for a long time.